Startup Juncture here at PhilCon NL with Boris from The Next Web. Boris, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Well, thank you.
To kick off with the first question, what would your definition be of failure?
Well, that's a tough one because I think as an entrepreneur you really embrace failure, and then it sort of becomes part of the whole process. And it's like a professional athlete where losing a game is not the end of the world. It's part of being an athlete. Right?
Yeah.
You lose some, you win some, and you learn from when you lose, and then do another one. So I think if all goes well, failure doesn't become something that you avoid at all costs, but it sort of becomes part of the process of being an entrepreneur.
Do you think we could make a distinction between the person as an entrepreneur and the person as an individual? Because sometimes I think that if you, at least especially in the Netherlands, if you fail as an entrepreneur, you have also failed as a person.
Yeah. So the entrepreneurs, like my friends and the entrepreneurs I hang out with, for them it's really a profession, right? It's a life choice. This is what you're gonna do the rest of your life. And if that's your attitude, then you also accept that there will be, you can't have 10 startups in a row that all are successful.
Successful, yeah.
So you have to know from the beginning that some will fail, and accept that.
Here in the Netherlands, as far as I know, but I've also read research on in Europe, there is quite a big stigma on failure. Do you agree with that? And what could we do about minimizing that at least?
Yeah, I think that's going to take 100 years if it will ever change, and it's really a cultural difference. And it's not just the stigma on failure; it's also a stigma on success.
On success, yeah.
In the US, if you sell your company, you get your photo taken of yourself on your red Ferrari or whatever in front of your amazing house.
You can't do that here.
You can do it here. No. The biggest compliment you can give a successful entrepreneur here is saying, success didn't change you.
Yeah, yeah.
Or like, well, I hope it did.
You don't have a new Bentley or.
Yeah, and. So I think we need to change that, and because it really helps. People get more ambitious if there's something of an end goal.
Exactly.
So yeah, we need to change it, but it's going to take a long time.
But you don't have tangible. You don't know how we could, because in the end,
well,
it's about experimentation, and I think if we as a country could experiment a bit more. Yeah. Or increase the cycle time a bit more, we would be more successful. But
that could help, yeah. But it's also simple things. I met a CEO of a bigger company, and we were talking about cars, and he said, "Well, I'd really love to have a Maserati." And I said, "Well, why don't you buy one? Because you can afford it." And he said, "Like, no, I can't do it because it would be the wrong perception."
Yeah.
And then he started complaining about that nobody in his company was really ambitious. And then I asked him, "What kind of car do you drive?" And he said, "Well, I drive an Audi, an expensive Audi." And I said, "What does the rest of the company drive?" And he said, "Well, they also all get Audis." So I thought, well, so nobody's ambitious because they think, well, if I work really hard, I still drive an Audi.
Drive an Audi, yeah.
So I said, buy that Maserati, buy a silver one, park it in front of the entrance of the company. And
just
say,
like you did, by the way.
Right, yeah, if you work just as hard as me.
But it wasn't the Maserati you were?
No, it was a Jaguar.
It was a Jaguar, okay, that's also great. We are from Startup Juncture. You have your own tech blog, which is quite bigger than ours. But do you think that we as media outlets could also talk a bit more about startups failing? Because we at Startup Juncture, at least, and I think it's also the case at Next Web, it's not an issue we discuss quite often.
Yeah, I think we do talk about it a lot, but the good thing there is that we are a very international blog. There's not a country in the world where they don't read the Next Web, which is really cool. But it also means that we don't talk about Europe or the US. We just talk about startups, and so I think we try to influence that culture a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm also realistic. I don't think we alone are going to change that.
Of course, of course. Okay, the other thing is you probably heard of, maybe you even know him, Mark Anderson from Anderson Horowitz. He once said in an interview that we should be careful with creating a fetish for failure. Because the flip side of the story is that what he says, at least, is that some startup founders they give up too early. Do you agree on that point? What's your take on that?
Well, I think one of the hardest problems for an entrepreneur is knowing when to quit in anything. And I've seen entrepreneurs or even just people in a company give up on projects where I thought like, oh, if you would only given it, one more month. On the other hand, I know entrepreneurs where I'm like, oh, gee, shit, please stop with this awful project you're doing, because everybody can see that it's a total failure. I don't have a recipe for that, so I think it's the hardest part about being an entrepreneur. Two more questions. What's your BTF, big time failure? Maybe just in a punchline. I've had so many failures that I wouldn't know which one to pick. But from the outside, the most obvious one is that I sold my company for millions, and then the stock went, to zero. So that's a very obvious thing. On the other hand, I think I made that mistake more as a human being than as an entrepreneur. So it's difficult. I think I make mistakes every day, every week. And
me too.
You can ask me the mistake of the week, and I'll tell you. So there's always something. I think the challenge is. Like a professional athlete, right? You lose games all the time. And,
but you keep going.
But you keep going. You focus on the ones you win.
The last question we have the opportunity to talk with you right now is about the Next Web, the conference that's going to be taking place. Can you give us a glimpse of what we can expect at the conference? Maybe some big names.
The big names? No, I won't name drop. No, I won't name drop. No, I think the good thing about our conference is that we generally don't name drop. We have big names, and you can find them.
Nelly
Cruz, of course, and we have some great speakers. But at the Next Web, we're always focused on the content much more than the name. And the reason for that is if you get the CEO of a big company, it might be impressive. But generally they can talk about anything because they're a listed company, so they'll just talk about last year's numbers or something.
No, and I think that's very good take on the issue. But what would then the content be? What could we?
So our strategy with the conference has always been we'll find the best speakers in the world. And then we tell them that they can talk about the past, but only look at the future. And then they can decide if they look at the next 6 months, the next 6 years, or the next 60 years. And then we sort of leave them alone for a while.
Great.
So, so the good thing is...
That sounds interesting, a vision of the future.
And the interesting thing, every conference, people ask me in advance, like, what are the themes of the conference? And I never know. And then during the 2 days, slowly they pop up. So suddenly you realize, like, hey, this is the third time I heard gamification or mobile first. And at the end of the conference, I can say, well, it's clear that the themes for the next few years are, and then I'll mention them. So it's as much an adventure for me as it is for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.